Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
So we're here with
Cool.
David Randall to be our tour guide through Greece as we wrap up Greece for the 15 Nations Global Tour. And I have my, co-host this way. Let's go here.
Yeah, we got two co-hosts today.
Yeah. So
This
I'll
is a first for us.
go ahead and bring up the 15 Nations Global Tour Greece space page on the screen here, and I'm going to drop it into the chat for y'all. It's also in the description of this video if you're here later. All right.
I love the logo.
Yeah. So this is stop number 12.
And I recognize a lot of names in the chat room today. A couple I don't, but I recognize most everybody. Some of our regulars. Okay, so we are finishing up with Greece. We were just talking before we started the presentation here about how quickly this week went, and I think part of that had to do with the summer games being in the middle. We started for a week, and then many of us took a weekend off to do the summer games, and then started back up again. So it seems like we were just getting into it when it's suddenly over. But it's kind of like you go to the Olympics, and then when it's over, you spend an extra week touring the country. That's kind of what we did here. So Greece was we didn't do as well in Greece as I would have thought. Greece was one of the few. I think you would consider a Western European. It's a Southern European, but it's if you're dividing Europe into Western and Eastern Europe, it's more along the Western side, which would be the only country I think that we've done so far that would qualify as being Western European. So I thought it would be a lot easier, but it was quite challenging. I think one of the biggest challenges we had was with the language, because not only do they have a different language, but they have a different alphabetical script that they use. So reading their writing when it's done in their native language in Greek was a challenge. And one of the things that happened, and this has never happened on any of our other countries, and we've been to some that don't use Latin script. We've been to Malaysia, we've been to Syria. But I created the 15 notables, and we started the process, and suddenly we started realizing that a number of our notables already had profiles on WikiTree, but because they were written in the Greek script, the system didn't pick up on it. So it didn't notify me as I was making the profile that there was already a profile online. And so that created some conversation, a pretty interesting conversation about how we deal with that in terms of we absolutely want to include the native language, when we know what that is. But how do we do that in such a way that we can still find the profiles and they don't get lost? A couple of the profiles that I created, in the beginning, I was notified that there was a duplicate in the Greek, and those profiles were about 8 years old. They had no connections. It was just the individual. They had no biographies. So they were really skeletal profiles that had been sitting there for 8 years and nobody's worked on. And some of that may just be that there aren't a lot of people that speak native Greek on WikiTree to find them. So those two I was able to merge, and we got those going. But again, the question kind of came up as to what's the best way. And I know we've got some standards already in place, but what's the best way to honor the native language and still make the profiles accessible? And also, if we're working on it and we are either English speakers or, if not English speakers, speak a language that's also written in Latin script, because we can make out Spanish or German or French. But if it's written in a script we don't recognize and the entire page is written in that script, it's really hard to do any additional research and figure out what's what when you can't make out the alphabet. So that was our first big challenge. But I was really surprised once we got beyond that, because again, it's a fairly modern Western country, that we weren't able to find more records online for the individuals that we were researching. Um, and I would have to say this was probably um, we made 4 connections, which is at the low end of average. So it wasn't terrible. But for the others that we didn't make connections for, we had a very hard time increasing their CC7s.
Mm.
And I think we only did it was probably about a less than 100 um, um, additional family members that we were able to add. And I'm running over here to my chart, but if we compare that to, let's say, Argentina, where we created almost 900 family members,
Mhm.
Kenya, we created almost 300, Haiti, we created 500, Malaysia, we created almost 300. So, you know, even compared to Kenya and Malaysia, which you'd think those records would be difficult to find, um, we were still far behind them. So it was a challenging country. Now, the good news is I do have an individual who has approached me about creating a Greece project, a permanent
Awesome.
project for Greece.
Yeah.
So
Exciting.
he will take what we've done and you know, we'll see what he can do with it. I'm not sure exactly what all his experience is, but I know he has some, which is why he has the interest in creating it.
Mhm.
So, you know, even though we may not have gotten as far as we did with some other countries, if if we've got a startup here and he can take that and run with it, um, you know, it'll all have been worth it. So let's take a look at a couple of the people that we did connect.
Okay.
If we can scroll down a little bit. Now, as I mentioned, this was done during the summer games, and that's why we chose Greece for this period. This is tour number 12, and so I tried to tie in a few of the notables to the to the Olympics. And so you'll see the first couple up here. Evangelos Zappis, we didn't get very far with him, but he's kind of early. He's 1800, 1865. We got some connections. I will say, in contrast to what I said about not having a lot of family members, we were able to connect at least 1 or 2 family members to every one of our 15 notables.
Nice.
So they all have that CC7 notables number at the top of their page,
Fantastic.
which is good. So we can see as if they start to grow, we'll be able to
Mhm.
tell a lot easier. So so we do have a handful of family members we were able to attach to him, but we didn't get very far and we did not connect him. But the next individual, so he was the founder of the modern Olympic Games. What he did was basically he had a lot of money. He went to the king of Greece and said, "This is what I want to do," and kind of got the ball rolling. He died before the first games happened. But he's the one that kind of got it all started. Now, the second person here, Demetrius Vikalis. I don't pronounce Greek words very well, so that's how I will pronounce it. But he was the first president of the International Olympic Committee, and we were able to connect him.
Mhm.
Nice.
He had my screen is a little slow here, so give me a second here. Yeah, so we were able to connect him. He now has 329 family members connected in his CC7, and he connected a little blank here. Yeah, his family connected to some English individuals, and that's how we made his connection. But we went quite a ways on my connection to me. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 individuals before it goes to England, and then on to
Mhm.
my family. So it was quite a few Greek relatives that got added to his profile. So
Mhm.
that's cool. We also connected the next individual who was a politician, and he's considered to be the basically one of the founding fathers, if not the founding fathers, of modern Greece and democratic Greece. And he was connected. I believe it was his wife. Yeah, he married an English woman. So we got out of Greece real quickly with him and into English records. And that one kind of fell into place pretty quickly for us, I believe. So we've talked about this each time we've done our stops that you never know when you start with an individual, you never know where you're going to end up. And you know, when we're talking about Demetrios here, it took us nine individuals to get out of it, Greece, and on our second individual, I think it's pronounced Eleftherios. That would be how I pronounce it. His wife was English, so we were immediately out of Greece, you know, working on his. And you just never know where it's gonna take you. Sometimes it takes you to one country. Sometimes you wind up in 4, 5, 6, 7 countries before you get to somewhere where you can make a connection. So then you'll see from here we've got quite a few that we were unable to connect.
Wow.
Spiridon Lewis here was he was the first winner of the modern day Olympic marathon, and he's technically the first gold medal winner of the Olympics. I say technically because they didn't give gold medals back then, but he came in first place, and had they given gold medals, he would have been the recipient. So he's considered the first gold medal winner, even though he didn't actually get a gold medal. The problem with him is that he was basically a peasant. I believe his occupation was water bearer, and I'm not sure exactly what that entails, but his records were not. We're talking 1800s records for the poor, and the peasants were not necessarily kept at all. And if they were, they're few and far between. So his was. We weren't expecting to get very far with his. A couple of the others I was a little surprised with. Georgios Papanikolaou. I can usually get the first half, and then my tongue starts to twist. He ended up in America, so I was kind of surprised that we didn't get very far with him. But I believe we only got. Let me click on his here. Yeah, all we got was his wife, who was also Greek, but they ended up in Miami. So I was a little surprised, but they came to America. But if they didn't have family, I didn't work on this profile. But if they didn't have kids, if they didn't have family that came over with them,
Right.
the fact that they were in America, they might have generated records for themselves, but not much else. But had we been able to find a death certificate for him in Miami and Florida, it might have had his parents' names listed. So, sometimes there's still clues that we can find going back to the old country. But in his case, we weren't able to do that. Which, again, we've got 15 individuals we're working on. Some get more attention than others. I don't know if that's because his death certificate isn't out there, or if we just didn't get around to looking for it. So it still may be. Sometimes we have people that go back to our prior countries, and within a couple hours are able to make a connection. And we think we just spent 3 weeks there and didn't make it. How did they do that? But I think some of that's just because we were focusing on other things, and somebody else came along and focused where we didn't, and they figure it out. The one that I worked on, and again, I'll have trouble pronouncing her name, but Katina Paxino. She was an Academy Award-winning actress. Most of the Academy Award-winning Best Actor and Best Actresses are connected, and I believe most of the supporting actors and actresses. She was a supporting actress. She was very difficult. You'll see there she only has 4 connections. Somebody that was that big of a movie star that they won an Academy Award, you'd think there'd be biographies or something out there. The problem was that she was, I don't think she was orphaned, but I think she left her family. She kind of abandoned her birth family. So there isn't much information on there. She did marry and have a daughter, but we're getting into living people at that point with her daughter. I don't know if she's living, but we don't know that she's deceased. So there really wasn't much there wasn't anywhere to go with that. She didn't seem to have any brothers and sisters that we were able to find. So, she's just an individual who left her family behind and didn't create a new family of any size ability. And despite her fame, the information is just I wasn't able to find. So somebody else may want to pick that up and see what they can do. But that was one I spent quite a bit of time on and just couldn't get anywhere. I did find a website that claims to have her family tree. It's a celebrity website and it claims to have her family tree on it. But they charge $12 for 3 months. And I've never heard of them before. $12 is not a lot of money, but it doesn't give you any information as to what you're going to find once you pay the $12 and open it up. And it could be nothing more than what I already have. So I chose not to do that. But somebody out there does claim to have her family tree. But nothing on Ancestry, nothing on Family Search. And so that one was a little disappointing. Now, if you go down 2 more spots, you'll get to Melina Mercury. That OU I don't do well with. She's also an Academy Award winning actress and was not connected, but we were able to connect her tree. So she has pull her up here real quickly.
44 connections, looks like.
Yeah, so she was connected through her husband, Julius Dawson. He was a movie director. He was also one of the individuals that was blacklisted during the McCarthy era. So he has quite a bit of an interesting story. But it was through him, and I believe he's also.
You want me to open his profile?
No, he was. You can, yeah. He was born in Connecticut, so he's American, but he did actually die in Greece. So he kind of did the reverse migration.
Interesting.
Yeah. And he had, let me see here. Yeah, and so his wife, his first wife, was actually a Danish violinist.
Wow.
Who was also considered a notable. So we got some information for her. So this is one of those cases where, we've talked about this many times, that famous people tend to marry famous people and be the children of famous people, et cetera, which is really beneficial to us because if we have one that either doesn't get us very far or only gets a certain direction, and then you've got another notable who has their own parents and so on that we can then start adding. So a lot of times we can get quite a distance just going to Wikipedia and seeing the family connections are there, and then we can take that information and go back to Ancestry or Family Search and get the documentation to support it. A lot of times Wikipedia actually has sources listed at the bottom. Sometimes they're better than other times, but that's the more famous people in your family tree, the easier it is for us to start making connections. And that's what happened in her case. We couldn't necessarily trace her Greek ancestors, but through her husband's American ancestors and his first wife's American or Danish ancestors, etc., we can we can get pretty far sometimes. And I was glad to see it because I have a fondness for the old movie stars, and when I see these Academy Award winners not connected, I'm really drawn to them. And then our fourth one, which is interesting if you've been following us, is our last individual here is the current Prime Minister of Greece. And the reason that's interesting, as I've repeated almost every stop, and it may be every single stop, we do not do well at connecting living world leaders. And I won't go over that again and again because this is probably the 12th time some people have heard that. But the leaders of the world outside the United States, at least, tend to be very private in sharing their personal information and their family information. In the US, we know every detail there is to know about our president's family members and even some of our senators and governors and Supreme Court justices, et cetera. But in many foreign countries, that information is either people just aren't interested in it, or in some cases, in cases where you have more of a what's the word I'm using? I don't want to say dictatorship, but more oppressive type governments. They don't want you to know about their personal life. They want, well, the example I always use is Vladimir Putin. He doesn't want you knowing the details of his personal life. He wants to put out a projection of almost a superhero character. And if you know about his divorces and his marital squabbles and the problems his children have had, et cetera, that's gonna kill the delusion. So they go to great lengths to keep that information private. But in this case, we were able to get some information. The other problem we have is, for example, in this case, the prime minister is um, he was born in 1968, so that makes him about 55, um, and his parents are still living. So even when you get to the parents, which wasn't too difficult to do in this case, but then you got to get to the grandparents. And if the parents aren't famous, finding the grandparents becomes a real challenge. So the younger these world leaders start getting, it's always weird when these world leaders are younger than I am, but and it's even weirder when they're my kids' age. But but they that becomes a challenge, and in some cases even the grandparents may still be alive. I haven't had that with our world leaders, but in some of the other projects I work on, where you've got people born in the um, 70s and 80s, they still have living grandparents, which means you got to go to great grandparents before you get to deceased individuals, where the records start becoming more public. So that's been our challenge with this. Now, the benefit we had is this prime minister. We say famous people marry famous people and are the children of famous people. His father was also a prime minister of Greece. So that made finding his parents easy. But very little information about his mother, who was the wife and the mother of a prime minister. Details of her life were very, very sketchy. But the father prime minister, his family was better documented. They come from a long line of politicians of various levels, so that made it easier. And you can see that we've got quite a bit, but you can see it's all written in Greek, which is really cool. But if we don't have some, when we open it up, if we don't have some English translation, it makes it real difficult. For non-Greek speaking people to work on the and not just difficult, but I think the other problem is if you have two choices and you've got one profile that's written in English and one in a language you don't understand, I think we tend to be drawn to the one that we speak. So so I think that becomes a little bit of a problem. But I will say we have a couple people on our team that really like their challenges and are drawn to those foreign languages. We've got some that are, linguists either by profession or by just by interest. But we do have some people that really enjoy those challenges and working with languages they may not be experienced with, but they go on and figure them out. And I give them a lot of credit for that.
It is a beautiful script, though, as I'm seeing the names.
Really cool looking.
Yeah. Gorgeous.
Yeah. So anyway, there's kind of our Greek rundown. Again, as I stated, we were able to connect every one of our notables to at least one or two family members. So that opens up some doors. And I'm pretty sure they're all deceased. Well, the individuals that we on the list were all deceased, so I'm pretty sure all of the connected ones were deceased as well. So that opens up doors for others to come in. And if we can get a Greek project off the ground, this may be a good place for them to start building.
Yeah,
So
that's really great.
That's exciting. Yeah.
David, as always, you do such a great job of picking a very diverse group of 15 notables to focus on. You know, just all walks of life and eras. So kudos.
Well, every time you tell me that, it puts more pressure on me for the next one. But I appreciate it anyway.
There's
Because
three
this
more.
next one that we're about to announce, I had a real hard time with the diversity. And I say, but Betsy's going to be disappointed if I don't have diversity.
I don't think so.
No, I don't. But yeah, so if we're ready, we could move on to our next country and see about diversity. We're going to
Yay!
Luxembourg next.
Cool.
Now, this is the first time that we, I believe, have stayed in the same continent from one country to the next. But I think we're going to find that Greece and Luxembourg are significantly different, despite being on the same continent. So we're going to have a very different experience. And I thought, well, I've mentioned before, the United Nations divides the world into 15 regions. And it's a little bit arbitrary, but that's there. I use that only because it's 15 nations. I had to pick 15 nations, so that helps me make sure I'm getting around the world. And at some point, we had to get to Western Europe. And the challenge here is this is supposed to feature countries that are not well represented, both on WikiTree and in the genealogical community in general. And most Western European countries are pretty well represented. The exception being the handful of countries they call microstates, which are, I think there's 6 of them in Europe, but that would be Andorra, Vatican City, Monaco, and San Marino, all those little tiny countries that are, 2 or 3 square miles and have, I know I was reading on Andorra in 1900, Andorra had a population of 5,000. It's not a very big country. And to find 15 notables amongst those 5,000 people, it's a challenge. So I didn't want to do those microstates. I couldn't do the big states like England and France and Germany because we've already got them covered. So I ended up with Luxembourg, a fairly small country, but not a micro country. So, but I thought it was going to be fairly easy because it is a fairly sizable country. And I found 15 notables. I found some really interesting notables. And I went to put them on my on the Luxembourg page, and as I was creating each one of them one by one, I found that they were already on WikiTree and had fully developed biographies, and for the most part were connected to the tree.
Wow.
So one by one, I had to cross them off my list. I had the world's strongest man who had from 1900, the world's strongest man at the turn of the century, 1900. Fascinating, already connected. I had Nobel Prize winner. Can't recall all of them, but I had 5 or 6 that I had to cross off. So then I had to go out and find more. I also, as some people know, I really try hard to find women to represent the country as well. And I could not, for the life of me, find famous Luxembourgian women who were notable enough that they had a Wikipedia page to be considered notable. I found some sites that talked about important women from their history, but none of them had Wikipedia pages, so they weren't. I couldn't use them as notables.
What about, did they have a Wikipedia page in their language?
No, because I do search internationally on the foreign language Wikipedia pages as well. And now there were a couple, I will say, I don't think it applied necessarily to the women, but there were a couple that had Wikipedia pages that were in one language and one sentence long. There was apparently a gymnastics team in I'll just say 24 or something along those lines, where the entire team had Wikipedia pages in French, I think it was. And every one of them just said he was on the team, the 1924 Olympic team, and that was it. And there was no family mention or anything. There's just not enough for us to, to go by to find, we have to have some sort of lead to, tell us where to start searching.
Right.
I couldn't use any of those. So this was a challenge. This was probably one of the hardest ones I had to find, 15 eligible um, notables. Then, as I was mentioning to the team earlier before we went on air, I had it all done. I finally found everybody. I got it ready to go, and I had quite a busy weekend, so I didn't get around to doing it. But last night I sat down to get it all online, and I could not get access to WikiTree. There was an error in my programming, and I could not get the page up. So I had all the information, everything ready to go. So this morning and most of today, I've been building this website, and I finished it about an hour ago. So it is already. But as I always tell you, if you see any links that don't work, any spelling errors, etc., let me know, because when I'm working at the down to the wire like that, I don't always have time to proofread and check everything out. But I think we've got everything here. So if we want to, excuse me, if we want to scroll down, we can. I'll introduce you to who we're going to be meeting in Luxembourg.
Oh, the spark plug in better. That's cool.
Okay, yeah. So, and I'm going to be even worse at pronouncing some of these names than I am at Greek. I do not speak
Greg.
any French at all. So if either of you speak French, you can help me out here.
I took high
Do
school
you want to help
French.
me with it?
Me
Pardon?
too. I had little high
So
school and college French.
I had zero. So I don't know if that's
Etienne,
Itene,
Etienne Lenoir.
Etienne, I don't know.
Etienne.
So we'll just let people read that.
Good idea.
He was the inventor of the spark plug. Now, interestingly, I put that there because that was what was interesting to me. He is noted as the developer of the. Well, let me open up his page so I can make sure I get it right here. Okay, so he was the developer of the internal combustion engine back in 1858. Now, he was not the inventor of it, but he was the developer of the first commercially successful internal combustion engine. So that's when you look up short bios on him, that's what you're going to see typically highlighted. To me, the fact that he invented the spark plug was even more interesting. So that's what I wrote there. Um, um, I always find it fascinating. This is 1858. This is before the Civil War in the United States. So, my reference point. Um, it always fascinates me, the technology and that was going on before, much earlier than I thought. Just a little piece of trivia that I found out recently: the fax machine was invented during the Civil War. They didn't have all the it didn't have all the technology, but they used, I guess, the telegraph lines, and they were able to telegraph maps and the military plans from one place to the other using some sort of early type fax machine that was able to draw out the maps based on whatever coding that they used to send it. So
Wow.
technology is not my thing, but you just would not have expected that. So those kinds of little pieces of history really fascinate me. Um, our next one is Kurt von Francois. Now I can say Francois. Um, um, he's a geographer and cartographer. He's considered German in most things that I read, but he was from Luxembourg. He's considered German because he worked for the German military. But he was Luxembourgian, and he joined the military, and he was sent to Southern Africa, and he did cartography and geographic studies. He really became the expert on Southern Africa for his time, and did a lot of mapping. The area now we know as Namibia. Um, is where he was stationed. And again, I only have a brief amount of time to read up on these people. It's frustrating because I pull up their bios and they're so fascinating. I want to spend the day reading about them, but I got to get on to the next one. So there's only a limited amount I can tell you about him. But he has a brother who is also a notable, who was in the German army. I did not have time to read about him, but that's going to be a boost to our search again. If we have two famous people, one maybe more information than the other, so that'll be helpful. And I believe, if I remember right, he had an aunt who was also a notable. I think she was a poet or something along those lines, but I have really very limited information there, other than that comes from Wikipedia, so it's the information is readily available there. Batty Weber, and I think Batty's an interesting name. It's funny sometimes, names that are probably very normal in foreign countries, but you don't hear, at least I don't hear in the United
That have
States.
an insinuation in another
Yeah, Batty
language.
is one of them. And I think I have a typo there. I'll have to go back. I think there's only one B in Weber, I'm pretty sure. So I'll go back and fix that. He was a journalist and an author. He is considered one of the prior to the 1800s, there wasn't a lot of public distribution of they didn't have media like we have now, and even newspapers and stuff like that worldwide were not always readily available. So when you're getting into 1800s, you'll find a lot of people, a lot of writers really helped define the culture of their countries. What we think of their country today as the culture of their country was often created by journalists and writers in the 1800s who wrote about experiences throughout the country that maybe if you grew up in a small village, even though it's the same country, you didn't know what was going on 100 miles away. So he's considered to have been very influential in defining the culture of Luxembourg as we know it today. Now, Dominique Lang, he may be a difficult one. Dominique Lang was a high school teacher by profession, but he was also an impressionist painter, and today he is considered Luxembourg's greatest impressionist painter. But again, he was just a high school teacher by profession at the time, so I'm not sure how famous he would have been at the time and how much information we're going to find on his family. But this goes to my trying to bring in some diversity, to bring in the arts. I found a lot of politicians, but he's one of Luxembourg's most noted artists. So we'll see. We'll see how we do with that. People always surprise me. Sometimes these people I think will never connect. 24 hours after we start, we've got them connected, and then some very famous individuals we never get connected. So
looks like he didn't
I don't
live very long.
No, and that's another thing. He really didn't. Probably, but math isn't great, but 35 years or so.
26, 25.
Yeah. So so that's going to be a hindrance too. And in 1919, you may not have found, today a noted Luxembourgian painter might still make it into the New York Times. Back in 1919, they probably didn't. I'm not sure if there are Luxembourgian newspapers out there. There may be French and other places, newspapers out there that people can find them in, but we'll have to see. Again, sometimes I'm surprised. Hugo Gernsback. If you're a science fiction fan, you probably know the name. He was an early science fiction publisher, and worked with a lot of the greats. There is something in the science fiction community called the Hugo Award. He is the namesake of that award, so he's a pretty big figure in. And he also, let me just double check, but I'm pretty sure he moved to the United States and worked. He died in New York City, so that could work to our advantage. My rule is that they had to be born in the United States. I mean, sorry, born in the country that we're visiting, but many of them move on to other countries and die elsewhere. So they don't have to necessarily. Oh, if you'll scroll down on this one, I made a note here. If you scroll down just a little bit, right there in red, I mentioned that somebody else had made a lot of Luxembourgian profiles. 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know if it was all the same person or not, but a lot of them look like they're GEDCOM files that are pretty messy and need some cleaning up. But this one seems to have a Wikipedia article cut and pasted, and I say that because it even had the
Yeah.
footnote numbers still in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've run across those
So
before.
so I made a note here that if somebody is so inclined, um,
Rewrite
it
the
would be really
biography.
great to go in and write our own
Yeah.
WikiTree biography.
Yeah.
We really, um, it's not necessarily illegal to cut and paste from Wikipedia, because they don't copyright their material, but it's still considered plagiarism if you're
Mhm.
taking somebody else's words and putting them on there as, if not your own, as WikiTree's own. So
Yeah, and there's a
we
help
want to
page about copying from Wikipedia about how we don't want to do that.
yeah, so we really want to avoid that, and I find that more with either um, older profiles,
Yeah.
or new members that just they don't realize that that's not what we want to do.
Yeah, and
Um,
um, the same goes for just copying directly from an obituary, a whole obituary.
Yeah.
Just make that the
Yeah.
whole biography. That's the same thing. You're just copying somebody else's
Yeah.
information.
yeah, and in
So,
that case, the newspaper articles tend to be copyrighted. So that does get into some legal copyright issues there. So we don't want to do that. And
yeah.
we can extend that to really anything.
Yeah.
You really don't take somebody else's words and post them as if they're
Sure.
your own.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'm linking
I
these
have,
pages in the chat here so that people can.
Yeah. So that'd be a
yeah,
big service for anyone who takes on the challenge of rewriting that bio.
Yeah.
yeah. And I have several pages that I've created off of WikiTree, but genealogy pages, and where I've written narratives. And years later, I'll be Googling and I find my own words on somebody else's webpage without any
Yeah.
recognition that it came from me.
Yeah.
I don't mind sharing the information. That's why I put it online. Um,
But still,
but
it's
to take it and even if you don't directly claim it's yours, if you're putting it on your website and you're not saying it's not yours, it
Right.
implies. So it's just it's a courtesy, number one, but
Mhm.
number two, it's just, again, it's plagiarism when you copy somebody else's words and don't give them credit for it. So William Justin Kroll. Now this is the very first
metallurgist.
metallurgist
Metallurgist.
metallurgist that we've
Okay.
had on the tour.
Metallurgist.
Yeah, he was a metallurgist. Um, and I don't know a lot about metallurgy, but he's fairly well known, and he invented the process. It's called the Kroll process, which is a commercially the commercial extraction of titanium from its ore.
Mm.
So again, that's something that is really out of my realm of knowledge. Um, but that is what he's known for, and he's apparently well known in um, chemistry
Metallurgy.
type circles and amongst metallurgists. Anybody that's a fan of titanium probably has heard of it before. Um, and I joke about that, but I understand that there are people that are interested in all kinds of things, and if you
Yep.
look at some of my interests, you'd laugh at them too. So
As a flute player, I should be interested. I mean, we make flutes out of silver, gold, and platinum. So there's a whole.
I've got some teeth made out of titanium. Some of my implants have titanium, um, which I actually broke one yesterday, and the dentist said, "Well, that's not possible. You can't break titanium." I did. Um, okay, so then we got Grant Hiddleston. Okay, this is interesting. Um, you see what I've written there? Do you have any idea what I'm talking about when I say he was an Olympic sculptor?
An
Maybe did he design a sculpture at the Olympic Village?
No. In the early days of the Olympics, sculpting was an event,
Wow.
and he won the gold
Yeah.
medal in sculpting.
That is
They had
very
quite a
cool.
few art-related categories. And if you head over to our Olympics project that we just started a couple weeks ago, you can read more about that. something I was not aware of until recently. But yeah, they had art-related categories for a couple of the Olympic events in the 1920s, and he won the sculpting award. Now, again, I've only read a little bit about him, but I think that may have been the sculpture that he entered and won with, may be his only claim to fame. Um, and therefore he may be a difficult one as well. He may be a rather obscure individual outside of this, but I had to put him up there because I just thought Olympic sculpting was such a fascinating thing that
Yeah, that is really neat.
we had to see what we can do with it. And I will. So if you scroll down to his picture there, now in order to create my table that you've got here, I need headshots basically. But this picture that you have there, I cropped from a bigger picture that actually has his sculpture with it. And as I mentioned, I ran down to the deadline, but I will go ahead and post that full picture up with this. That'll give that'll show his sculpture as well.
That's really neat.
And apparently he did it out of plaster, and it was left in plaster up until the 2000s. And then sometime in the early 2000s, they bronzed it. So it is now a bronze sculpture, but it took almost 100 years for them to do that.
Wow.
Now, Madeline Friedenkainen, she's going to be an interesting one to research because she was Luxembourg's first female cabinet minister. She had to resign due to a scandal, and I did not have time to read what the scandal was, so I have no idea what she did. But she resigned and went into seclusion for the rest of her life, and was no longer a public figure. So we'll see what that was all about. But she's Luxembourg's first female cabinet member, and the 1960s, and she was also, I believe, her husband was also a cabinet minister. So that'll open up some doors there. If she is not, like I said, she kind of became apparently a recluse, but he stayed active. So, and his name was Frieden. Her maiden name was Kinnan. So, so we'll get him up there, and that may be helpful. Now, Camillo Felgen. He's a singer and a lyricist, apparently very famous in his home country and maybe surrounding countries. So he won this event that is apparently very, very popular in Europe, but I don't think at least I haven't heard much about it. I hear periodically about it, but the Eurovision Song Contest, which is an annual event in Europe where, competitors compete for the continental championship, I guess. Again, it's supposedly a huge deal in Europe, but something I've only heard about in passing here in the United States. So that'll be interesting to find out more about that. But he was very famous in his country, particularly. And I believe I don't have the information. I believe he worked with some pretty big names. Let me pull up right quickly here. Yeah, it says here he translated the only two songs recorded by the Beatles into German, which is I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You. But he worked with, I thought it listed, he worked with Phil Spector, Connie Francis, some other pretty big names. So not real well known to my knowledge in the United States, but pretty well known in the music circles. Josie Barthel, I believe it's pronounced, Luxembourg's only gold medal winner. Now, I should have put an asterisk here, but so here's the deal with this. He was a track and field runner, and he won the first gold medal for Luxembourg. However, many, many, many years later, I believe in the 2000s, excuse my phone, it was determined or discovered that another individual who ran for France, no, he was actually a weightlifter for France in the early 1900s was actually from Luxembourg. So he was actually the first gold medal winner, Luxembourgian gold medal winner, but he was participating for France. So he's a French, the credit went to France. But Josie Barthel is the first individual to actually win a gold medal in, under the Luxembourgian flag, and the only gold medal. And in fact, they've only had 2 medal winners since the Olympics began. The other was not a gold medal. Gaston Thorn, politician. He was a prime minister, but he also held top-level positions in the United Nations and then in the European Union later. So he was both a local politician and then also a worldwide figure. So that's why of the politicians, sometimes I get a list of 10, 15 politicians, and I have to figure out which one I want to use, but that's why I chose him. Now, you look at the next two, we talk about diversity. We've got our very first cyclist and our very second cyclist. I picked 2. The reason is because Charlie Gall was a very big name in cycling and a very prominent Luxembourgian athlete. But as I mentioned, I struggled to find any women of note. And I found Elsie Jacobs, who was also a cyclist. So I made an exception to my rule, and I put 2 cyclists here back to back. And none of that really matters once you start tracing their family tree, because their families have nothing to do with each other. But I do try to keep it more diverse. But so we've got 2 cyclists here, Charlie Gall and Elsie Jacobs, both mid 20th century. 1950s and 60s, I believe. We have a champion footballer. We call it soccer here in the United States. Everyone else, not everyone else, but many other places, most other places call it football. Louis Pilot. Don't know much about him other than he's, very prominent in the football field. And then our final notable is our living current prime minister. I don't know if they pronounce the X as an X, but we pronounce it as a Z, or an X, Xavier. Xavier.
Yeah.
I don't know how the Luxembourgians pronounce it, but I will say Xavier Bettel. And don't know much about him. He's fairly young. That's going to be the challenge because his parents are very possibly still living. Young enough he could have grandparents still living. So we'll see, how easy it is to find his family tree.
Looks like we have
So
some
there's our
comments.
15 notables.
Awesome. It looks like it's going to be a very interesting 3 weeks.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Like I said, I thought Luxembourg, being Western European, would have all kinds of information out there, and it wasn't easy to come up with these 15. So we'll see how many have records out there. I'm curious to see how quickly, because Luxembourg's so small geographically, how quickly we wind up in other countries with many of these people, and how many stayed within Luxembourg. That'll be interesting to see.
Darren is sharing that ABBA won the Eurovision contest in 1974, looks like.
Yeah.
And then we got another Celine Dion also was a Eurovision winner.
Celine Dion, yeah.
And then, let's see, we got Madeline's scandal was a calculated media attack smear campaign by the political opposition.
So Lisa apparently knows something about Luxembourgian politics, so that hopefully she'll participate with us and give us some guidance on this.
And then Thomas was sharing, that he took off for the Greek week. He shared the details with a Greek genealogy group, but nothing came out of it. And then he says, this is about the native language. It's really important to use that native language to begin with. Yeah.
And I think a number of us, there were things going on the sports, the summer games, even though that was only a weekend. A number of us were working on the preparation, and it was pretty exhausting weekend. So when it was over, we didn't jump right back in, I don't think, to to our Greek research. So I think that worked to Greece's disadvantage, but
Looks like
nonetheless, we did okay. I was just surprised, in comparison to our other countries, it really wasn't
Yeah.
that far behind any of the others. But I just thought, being a westernized nation, that
Mhm.
it was going to be a lot easier to find the records
Yeah.
than it turned out to be. But that's the surprises we run into. That's part of what's part of the fun, is you just don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, Lisa just Googled it. Okay, well, we can use good Googlers on
Oh,
the team too, so that works.
that's an awesome job. That's really
Yeah.
really great work though in Greece, even though there was the challenge of having the wiki games at the same time or
Mhm.
right in the middle.
Mhm.
But you guys did an awesome job as always, and I'm really excited to see where you guys go with Luxembourg.
Yeah. Bravo to the team and to David,
Thank you both much.
your leader.
And thank you to all the team. It's, as I say over and over again, I don't get a lot of time to participate in. Once I get it up and going, I kind of have to take a back seat. I usually try to get in there for one or two, but it's really the team that just takes it and runs with it, and it's just fascinating to watch the process as it moves along.
Well, and it will be so exciting to see what that member who's interested in running with
In
the
the Greek
Greece
project,
project
yes.
would be
Yes.
what happens there. So that'll be cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions from the audience, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up if that was everything for this.
Yeah, and I will say, I recognize most of the names here, but if there's anybody that's new, we still have I think 3 more countries to go, starting with Luxembourg, but it's not too late to join in. And if you think you don't know what you're doing, that's fine. We'll take you by the hand and walk you through it. So, don't worry about that.
Great
I know there's
opportunity to
people.
learn.
Yeah, we had new people jump in on the Greek project, and just send me a note if you want to join, and or just jump in. You don't even have to send me a note. Just jump in and start seeing what you can accomplish.
Great. Well, Betsy, you have tomorrow.
Yeah,
Everybody
the reveal from
come back.
August's rock event, Random Acts of WikiTree Kindness. So that is on YouTube at 3 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. And so we'll be.
Everybody come back for that.
Yes, please.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
All right. Thanks. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.